Hey guys, Wildock Studios here, and today we're going to go over a question from the Wildock Studios Discord um, with a user that's using the Couch Co-op local multiplayer template, and I'll just read the question as stated. It says, I'd like to know how to get the names and locations of all active characters when I'm interacting with the BP interactable child. I noticed that active players array in the game mode, but I'm not sure if I'm near the answer or if I can make it work. I'm trying to teleport all active players when any of them interacts with an object. Could you help me with this? I'd appreciate it so much. So I'd like to say thanks for the question, and this will probably fall in line with the development 101 courses that I've started. I'll likely turn this into like a second parter of the series, and so it doesn't pertain strictly to the couch co-op local multiplayer template. I'd like to teach this in a way that can be used universally, because it doesn't really matter about the game. These principles should pretty much apply to like any project that someone's working on, regardless of if it's started in a template or not. But essentially, there's many ways to do what you're asking how to do, and there's not really a wrong way, but there is a way that's going to perform this action that will help you in managing your game state. So you're kind of headed in the right direction if you're wanting to think about this in a way that your game mode can perform logic based on the information. And you are correct in the sense that the player array, which is in your game state, which is inside of the game mode, has the ability to get information about each one of the pawn indexes that exist within your game. And you could technically cast to this pawn as a third person character and get the data off of it this way. So I could essentially cast here, and that would result in me getting all of the elements within the third person character and returning that information. However, I would say anytime you need to just get information off of a player and you're not needing to send something to the player, and maybe even if you need to send something to the player, it's a smart idea to start setting up blueprint interfaces for these type of operations, because it makes your functions more modular, and you can apply this to not only a character, but you can apply it to say this box or this box. If it had a name or a location, it could return that data with the interface the same way that your player would. Now, I likely named this the wrong thing because this technically should be a generic get data interface about any actor. And you would set this up to where you could return the name or location of pretty much any actor easily. Now, because the question is specifically on players, that's how I structured this. But you essentially would go into like your blueprints folder, right click at the very top. The easiest way is to just type an interface here, and you'll see the blueprint interface. When you create this, it's going to load up this screen like this. And then over here on the right, you're going to have like a new function or an unnamed function. I can't remember. But anyway, give it a name that makes sense to you. Also name the interface in a way that makes sense to you for the functions that you're going to be performing here. And remember, you can always add functions. So this one interface can serve many different purposes. And then over on the right over here, you're going to have inputs. So you can hand data to the interface. And you're going to have outputs, meaning you can run a function that will request data back. So an example of how this is implemented on the third person character in the class settings, over on the right, you'll have this implemented interfaces. You just add the interface here. Once you've done that, you can call functions from the interface like get data, right? Or you can override functions on the interface section over here by double clicking it and then getting the thing that you want to return to the call. So if anything calls get data on my third person character, it's going to return the name and the location variable. I just said Joe is the name, and the actor location I'm just returning directly into the node. Then over in the game mode, basically what you don't have anything here, right? But over on the left hand side, you create a new function. So it would just be this plus mark here and say get data. Double click it and you're going to end up with an input and a return node. And inside of this, I'm just using the GameState player array with a loop to get the player pawn, and I'm calling the get data interface to return those values. On the trigger box, and just so you can see, I've placed the trigger box here. I've made it into a blueprint. On the trigger box in the event graph, on the overlap, and by the way, collision, you only want to return your player. The default for this is not this way. You want to ignore everything except for the pawn. There's no reason to be paying for all of these other things for overlap events. So just a little side note there. On overlap, we're going to get the game mode. And because we need to execute code in our actual game mode, we're going to cast. This could be another place you have an interface implementation, but casting isn't that bad here. We're only doing it once on overlap. And then we're going to call the function we made in the game mode. So you can see like get player data is the function. And then in this function, we're just returning the name and location, right? Because that's what the game mode is doing. It's just a function we're calling that checks the interface of the player that's in the player array of the game state and returns the name and the location. Now, this is a really efficient way of doing this, and it also keeps the request in the game mode so that if you have anything else that you need to manage or maintain about your game state, your server is aware of it. Especially in like multiplayer games, this is going to make a lot of sense. However, and I'm just printing this out, and we can show that this works really quick. And by the way, this is a return to retro project I've been doing another series on, if anybody's wondering. So you see that it prints out Joe and the location of Joe. However, to continue on the inheritance, component composition talk of the last Devo 101, I can make this trigger box into a child. So we'll create a child blueprint class, right? This child blueprint class essentially is going to do the same thing because it's calling this parent actor begin override overlap. So if I drug this child out, essentially it would be doing the same thing as the parent right now. If we go edit this child, and just for the sake of knowing that this is the child, I'm gonna go put like an arrow or something on it just to make it stand out. We'll go to the viewport and we will make this arrow visible at runtime. So we're not going to hide it during the game. So we'll know, and yeah, it's fine pointing to the side. We'll know that the one with the arrow is the child. Now, I did not make the actual thing visible at game here. We need to do that. So they're going to do the same thing. So if I overlap this guy, it's going to perform that logic, and it's going to go to the game mode and request the interface and return the location and the name. If I overlap this one, it's going to do the same thing. Now, because it's a child, it allows us an opportunity to do this a different way, which is why I said there is really no wrong way. It just depends on how you want to use this. Because the player has this interface on it, we don't need those two ghost things. You can technically use this node called get all actors of class, what this is going to do is it gets more expensive as objects get added to the world, but there is pretty good filtering on it so that it's not as expensive as it once was. So this should be perfectly safe to do this if you don't care about needing the context of this information outside of the actor itself. So if the trigger box is good enough for you and you don't need this data elsewhere in your game mode or game state, then you can just do this here and then essentially call the get data function directly. Let's see if I can find it. Player message. And then you would just pipe this directly in. So this is an example of the trigger box getting all the actors of the class and calling the interface that we set up on the player to return the name. I'm gonna just go copy the original text formatting here. And so that we know, oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. And so that we know this needs to be a toString. That this is the child. I'm just going to add child overlap or child class or child trigger. Yeah, trigger. I'll add that to the text format so that we know this is a child. And now if we run, they're essentially going to return the same data. Boom. Joe with the location. Same thing here. Joe with the location. But they do it in a much different way. In the context of the data collection, the scope, if you will, of the variable results are maintained to the actor that's in the scene versus the parent has the information at the game state, which means that your manager, your server, your local host of either a co-op game or a client-based game is going to know this information and be able to perform gameplay logic off of it inside of a state managing location versus trying to pass the data off here, because essentially you could get this back to the game mode, but you would have to call your game mode and pipe the data in. So it's just two different ways to perform the same steps, and one does what it needs to do to get the data over to the game mode. One keeps the information localized, but returns the same results. Anyway, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I do want to say thank you to all the Patreon members. Thank you for all the people, all the WildOx Discord family members. Thank you to everyone who has become a member, not only subscribed and hit that like button, but actually has become a family, a YouTube family member of WildOx Studios, and has contributed in some way, shape, or form, picked up items off the store, sent over super thanks if these videos are helpful to you. Happy developing, and until next time, guys, toodles.